So we're just really pleased right now to have both of you here today. Thank you for joining us to share some information about what's happening in Medina County.
Thanks, Colleen. Today, again, we're discussing the violence that's occurring in Medina County, and I want to thank Leadership Medina for hosting this, and of course, Lee, thank you very much for coordinating this entire series as well as our participation in it. We'll start off with introductions. Again, many of you do know who I am. I'm Ed Kinney. I am the police chief here in Medina. I started out at the Medina Police Department in 1997 as a patrol officer. Started out on the night shift and then was promoted into our community-oriented policing division. Back when we had that, that was supervised by Ron Stoller at the time. Many of you know Ron. Shortly after that, I was promoted into the Detective Bureau to conduct narcotics investigations, where I spent a considerable amount of my career doing that type of work. I worked out of the Detective Bureau here, as well as the Medina County Drug Task Force. I was assigned to them for several years as well. After that, I got promoted to sergeant in 2011 and commanded the afternoon shift for many years until 2017, when I was promoted to the police chief, and I have been here ever since. Again, I am the chief for Medina Police Department. We are the municipal law enforcement agency here in the city. We're responsible for all law enforcement activity in the city, as well as Lafayette Township. We provide policing services to that township through a contract. We have an authorized strength of 42 officers, and we are currently at 40, I believe. Just like everyone else in the world today, we have a challenge in hiring and retaining personnel. It's quite a challenge, but we're able to fill our vacancies with very good quality officers, and that's really my primary goal. So that was a little bit about myself. I'll turn it over to the sheriff.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, thanks for taking the time to participate in this. I think it's a fantastic idea, and it was great to meet Lee. He came out to the sheriff's office several times to have good dialogue, so that was enjoyable, Lee. Thank you. I actually grew up in Medina County, graduated Medina High School, started my police career actually at Put-in-Bay for one season, and one season was enough up there. Then I was hired at Montville Police Department in 1999. As an officer, stayed in that position and role until 2003, and then I was promoted to sergeant. Mostly we switched shifts. It was just, obviously Montville's considerably smaller than Medina City, so we would do day shift and then afternoon shift sergeant for roughly 9 years. And then in 2011, I was selected as the police chief for Montville Township after Chief Tom Acklin retired. So from 2011 until this January, that's where I stayed. And Montville's a great community, great individuals, and I've been very blessed to be a part of that wonderful team out there. So starting in January, I became the Medina County Sheriff, and again, that agency is staffed, as similar to what Chief Kinney said, with wonderful individuals that have the desire to truly make a positive impact in our community. And I think that's what makes Medina County successful, not just at the sheriff's office, but other agencies. It's hiring good quality people, and it means a lot. So I'm learning every day here in this new role. So there might be some questions that I might just have to be honest with you and say, you know what, I don't know that, but I'll certainly get that answer for you and get back to you with that. So the sheriff's office responsibilities, we over the court security for the common police court on the square, the civil processing, obviously the jail operation, which is a large portion of the sheriff's office budget. We do provide law enforcement services to all the other non-incorporated areas, which is roughly 42,000 individuals within the county. And I think you'll hear this throughout our conversation. We're a very collaborative county. So although the chief has resources here, if he needs something from the sheriff's office, we'll help them out, and vice versa. They're more than happy to help us out as well. Then we operate a dispatch center, and that covers basically all the townships, excluding Montville, Medina Township, Brunswick Hills, and obviously the cities. So it's again very large, and a new responsibility and new things to learn. So having said that, we can get into the topics.
Yeah. just as a side note, it's interesting. I've been a police officer in Medina for 25 years. And until the sheriff was elected, I had no idea some of the things that the sheriff's department does and what they're responsible for, that the civil division and the size of that jail. It's almost overwhelming, I'm sure.
It absolutely can be.
Okay, so back to the topic that we're discussing today is violence that's happening here in our community, whether it be at the city of Medina or countywide, that the sheriff and his deputies are experiencing. But we should define the issue. And the definition of violence is behavior involving physical force intended to hurt, damage, or kill someone or something. I want to preface this entire conversation with just kind of a note that Medina County and Medina City are beautiful. We're very, very fortunate to work and live in this county, and we truly do not have a severe problem when it comes to violence in our community. Obviously, we have those events that I would consider anomalies that present themselves throughout the year and over the past years, but by and large, Medina and Medina County is a very peaceful county. We're not afflicted with some of that inner city crime that Cleveland and even some of the suburbs of Cleveland are afflicted with. But to start that conversation, we have to look at what types of violence are occurring in our community. And I'll start with what we're seeing here in the city. Again, we don't get exposed to a lot of very serious violence. We might average a murder every 2 years, with the exception of last year. Again, this was an anomaly. We had 2 murders last year. Many of you may recall it was that double homicide that we had down on Lafayette Road at Baxter Street. We were able to quickly get that individual in custody. Again, that was a big collaborative effort, countywide collaborative effort with us, our detective bureau. The sheriff's department was a tremendous asset and tremendous partner in that manhunt we had to catch that individual down there in West Salem. So we do have those types of incidences, again, that I want to reiterate are anomalies, but when they do happen, we address them in a collaborative nature and try and get those individuals or that threat taken care of as quickly as possible. But our biggest issue we have here in the city of Medina is domestic violence. We respond to probably at least 2 domestic violence calls each day. Not all of them involve physical violence. Some of them are just verbal in nature. And as we've seen over the past years, many years ago, the Ohio legislature enacted the preferred arrest policy for domestic situations. When we're presented with a situation where 2 participants are involved in a domestic and one of them is either claiming assault or there's evidence of an assault, we're obligated to make an arrest. So we do have a high incidences of domestic violence arrests here in the city of Medina. And we also do have a tremendous number of just simple assault calls, whether it be roommates who are not romantically involved, get into a situation and assault one another. Other situations we have are drugs are involved, where it may be a drug deal gone bad or somebody's engaged in some type of physical confrontation over a disagreement with drugs. So that's a high level overview of some of the violence that we experience here in the city of Medina.
I'll just jump in there as well. Our situation mimics basically what the city's dealing with, domestic violence, assaults. And from 2020 till today, we've had 174 domestic violence charges. And the issue with domestic violence, it's not normally, I mean, obviously every situation is different, but there's children involved. So domestic violence affects so many different people. It's not just a 2-person type of issue. It really affects the entire family dynamic. And we offer a lot of resources for that. If it ends up in criminal charges, the courts offer resources, victims advocates and such, which protects or attempts to protect or provide assistance to the families. And I think that's, again, very critical in this county, that we provide as much value and resources to those that are in the midst of a personal struggle or a personal crisis. As the chief made mention, drugs are an issue, maybe not necessarily just for domestics, but for other types of crime, whether it's burglary, robberies, assaults. That tends to correlate right back to the main problem, which is the drugs. And certainly the addiction issue has not gone away. And we've talked many times, Chief Kinney and I and other law enforcement representatives, we will never be able to arrest our way out of the addiction problem. It's a multifaceted approach to the situation, whether it's inpatient treatment, outpatient treatment. Sometimes it is important or necessary for someone to be incarcerated. So there's a whole host of things for that. I know that's somewhat off topic, but it really does affect the violence and such within the county. I just want to go back a little bit. As the chief made mention, thankfully, we're not like Cleveland or Akron, but I think that's why people move to this county. It's convenient to go to work in Cleveland or Akron, but they want the services that are offered here from not only the police departments, but our schools, our fire and rescue. All those services are some of the reason why people come out here. And it truly is a wonderful place to live and raise a family. And that's why we have to do our due diligence and work together to make sure it remains that way as well. One of the questions we kind of talked about is, what are some of the causes? Obviously, we don't know all the answers to what causes certain people to react in certain ways. I do think, and I'm sure we're all tired of hearing this, I do think COVID and some of the isolation has caused some of these issues, domestics, and obviously the increase in addiction. I don't think that's any secret to anyone. I don't think that's even just Medina County. That's state of Ohio and truthfully around the country. I think it was last year's number of 2020. We had 42, I believe, overdoses in the county, and that certainly is those are fatalities. That number has certainly increased from 2019. I think the high was in 2017, if I recall correctly. So again, I know we're all kind of COVIDed out, if you will, but I do believe that has played some role in some of these numbers and what we're seeing in our area and across the country.
I agree. Our experience here in the city with a vast majority of the calls for service that we're dealing with are involving substance abuse, whether it be illicit drugs or alcohol. I think it's a root cause when it comes to the theft calls we go to. I think it's a root cause when we go to the domestic calls we go to. There always seems to be some type of nexus to illicit drug use, substance abuse, alcoholism, some sort of nexus to that in the situation. When it comes to drug abuse, I agree with the sheriff. We're never going to arrest our way out of that situation. But again, I had quite a bit of experience in narcotics enforcement, and I've spoken to hundreds and hundreds of these individuals who have been addicted to opiates, and that we had a bad year in 2016 and 17. That definitely was the highest year as far as overdoses and fatal overdoses that we had. I'm thankful that the numbers have come down. Unfortunately, we're starting to see those numbers trend back up. But I think a multifaceted approach that the sheriff mentioned of treatment, recovery efforts, and ultimately at times it does require incarceration. I've talked to so many people who have been addicted to opiates, and they say the final straw, the thing that finally saved their lives, was going to jail, being removed from the circle of friends that they have, being removed from access to the drugs, and being given an opportunity to clean up inside the jail. And then, of course, we'll touch on this a little bit later, the many programs that the sheriff offers in his jail when it comes to addiction services. So that's what we're seeing in the city is that nexus of substance abuse. It really seems to be a major driving factor in a lot of the violence that we see, not only the violence, but the suicides, the overdoses. We've definitely seen an uptick in suicides, and I think that just lends credibility to just the overall reckless behavior that we're also seeing. We've both departments have seen a marked increase in pursuits, something as simple as a traffic stop where our officers do many of them every day. It's incredible the amount of people who are now running from us. They just refuse to stop. I think they've seen in some of the larger cities, such as Cleveland, they've restricted their pursuit policy so much that as you go out into the suburbs, these folks think that, okay, well, because Cleveland has essentially a no pursuit policy, that all these other departments do as well, and they just refuse to stop. So I know the sheriff's office has experienced that as well.
Agreed. If I can just go back a little bit, both of us may mention 2016 and 17 were the high numbers for fatal overdoses. And I know we both feel the same way. 42 is still too many. Those 42 lives have family, friends, and every, other connections. I went to an overdose awareness gathering, if you will, in Brunswick, and they had pictures of all the individuals around the room. And when you see those pictures, you see individuals. Almost every single one of those photos, someone was smiling. And I look at that and think that's someone's life and that's someone's family. And so, although we're thankful that number has decreased, we still have a lot of work to do. And truthfully, when I say we, I'm referring to law enforcement. We can certainly help out with that. Thankfully, we talked about some of the treatment, but both Wadsworth Municipal Court, Medina Municipal Court, and both common police courts have different drug courts. All four of them do, which again, it's a way to provide treatments to citizens here in this county and outside of the county too. The other question we talked to ourselves about was how do we, or what programs do we have as law enforcement that we could add or create to mitigate or prevent some of this violence? We have a partnership here in the county with Alternative Paths and the Adam Board to put on a crisis intervention training. And I don't want to speak for the chief, but almost all of our deputies, and that was done before I got there, have gone through that 4-day class. And that gives the necessary training for our staff to be able to interact with people in mental health crisis or other situations that maybe they're not thinking rational. And that provides the way to de-escalate that. And we saw that around the country, how there was a cry or a push for more enhanced training for law enforcement. And I'm proud to say a lot of the training that they were recommending, we as in Medina County already do that. And that's something we should be proud of, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep looking at new ways to engage the community and certainly keep this training ongoing. I know the chief has some other things that they do specifically for domestic violence, which I think is very interesting to share too.
Yeah, I think to reiterate the point for the crisis intervention training that we have received, every one of our officers has been through it, with the exception of the 3 officers that just started this past weekend. It will be mandatory for them to go through that training. But AP is an absolute critical partner with us in our crisis intervention training and part of our de-escalation policy. We do have a written policy inside our use of force that we're required to first de-escalate when reasonable or practical. And the crisis intervention training is a huge part of that. We're able to, and it's not just with people who are experiencing a mental crisis, it's with every crime or every assault or every fight we go to, we're able to use those crisis intervention training techniques to de-escalate that situation. So I can't reiterate how important that partnership with Alternative Paths is for all the county departments, because all of the county departments participate in that program and that training. They hold that once a year, and every year it's packed full of newer officers that are coming through the ranks.
Can I just add one thing? Not only is it officers, but we're sending dispatchers too.
Yes. Yes.
They are a vital component to the success of these outcomes of that. So I just want to add that in.
The de-escalation starts right at the phone call to our police department through our dispatchers. They're trained in de-escalation techniques and also through the crisis intervention training. So I think that just speaks to how important that training and that program is. Some of the other programs that we have here at the police department to help mitigate or interrupt some of these violent confrontations or situations. Specific to domestic violence, we have a follow-up program where after the fact, we'll send a detective out the next day or 2 days later to do a survey with the victim make sure they're safe in the home that they're at, whether it be their own home or if they went to a hotel for a few days. They also follow up on any type of injuries that had occurred during the actual incident. Many of you probably know that if you're struck or assaulted, that the bruises may not show up immediately. So the officers can't adequately document those injuries at the time of the actual call. But 2 days later, those injuries then present themselves by way of bruising, and they're very visible, and the detectives are able to document that and also guide that victim through the court process, make sure that any protection orders that have been issued are being followed, and essentially just answer any questions and be an advocate for the victim of that crime that they've been exposed to. So that's one program. We also, and again, this is a county-wide program, we also use our school resource officers and leverage their relationships that they've built inside the schools and the relationships they have with the kids to sort of get that moving in the right direction. They're taught, no bullying, to settle their disputes with conversation and discussion rather than violence. And the school resource program, I think most of the schools in the county have an officer that's assigned to them. We have 3 school resource officers in the city. I know the sheriff's department has a handful of school resource officers. It's important to note that all the school resource officers in the county are supported through the McDAC grant. There's the McDAC levy, Medina County Drug Advisory Committee, and each year they grant out dollars for the school resource officers. They support ours, the sheriff's, Brunswick's, Wadsworth, anyone who has a school resource officer in the county. It's supported by that McDAC levy. So that's a critical source of funding here in the county so that we can maintain those school resource officer programs. Along with that is, of course, the DARE program as well. I value that DARE program because that's introducing the children to good, positive role models that are police officers early in their academic career in the elementary school. So really it comes down to just building relationships with the kids here in the county and walking them through conflicts and explaining to them how to properly manage and work their way through a conflict so they don't resort to violence. They can handle it with their words. Again, I'll turn it over to the sheriff. I think he's got many of the same programs as well.
Yeah, we do have the DARE and SRO and the 4 schools we cover, but I want to piggyback on the juvenile programs. One program that, again, is countywide, so we all should take pride in it, is the Medina County Police Activities League. When I was at Montville in 2010, actually Medina City started it in 2007, and I believe they had 10 to 15 students that participated in that. And actually, originally it was over at the Armory on Lafayette Road. Detective Scott Thomas started that. When he retired, Judge Alone at that time approached Montville and asked us to take it over. So at which point we did. We started at Garfield. We started with 9 students. And I'm very proud of the fact that since that time, we're now in 5 different school districts, 10 buildings, and it encompasses 6 law enforcement agencies. So it goes back to what the chief said. We're trying to develop that relationship with our youth at that young age, so they see our officers as human beings. Someone that they're going out, they're playing basketball, dodgeball. We're doing field trips. We're taking them to the science center to maybe an Indians or Browns game. Those are the things that they'll remember about. And hopefully they remember they did that with one of their local officers, whether it's an Medina City or a sheriff's deputy. We can do that. And then if there's an issue, maybe that there's some police involvement, they'll know, oh, hey, I remember Officer Smith. They really were treating me well in PAL. The other component of PAL, which is really unique, is we do have a food pantry. And how special is it to see law enforcement? We actually deliver the food. We're not, but Feeding Medina County does a great job, and they're a partner of ours. But we're actually delivering food to some of these houses. And so many people in the county don't realize that. But again, that's breaking down the barriers of maybe any friction that would exist with that family and law enforcement. And that is I can't stress enough how special that is and how proud I think all of us are about that. We have several other programs with juveniles or teens, a free advanced driving program, out at the Career Center, the Take Control program, and then a diversion traffic program. Again, although they're learning lessons, driving lessons or other interaction, they're also building a relationship, which they may never have had, or their only encounter was maybe receiving that citation or being involved in an accident. We're taking those barriers down and putting the officers one-on-one in a car with the juvenile and maybe some of the other kids. Again, it's just that human relationship, and it really has paid so many dividends, not only for the child but also for that family, because then the child goes home and tells the family, the parents about their experiences, and that is just so invaluable. I'm on a soapbox for a second, but we unveiled that program, and there was someone that was from Wayne County, and they said, "Why does Medina County do this? And we haven't seen this," because the Take Control program is the only one we're aware of is in Medina County throughout the entire state. And we correlated to all the agencies in this county are large enough that we can handle our cases or handle the fatals or handle the reports, but we're still small enough to truly care about the outcome. I'm not criticizing other agencies. I'm not criticizing Cuyahoga County, but if they're on one call, maybe there's 4 other calls pending. They have to keep moving to go to those other ones. Thankfully here, we can develop those relationships, and it truly means something. It means something to the families, and it makes an impact. So that's my soapbox on that. But as the chief said, sometimes it's necessary to have individuals arrested for, it's certainly necessary for crimes of violence, domestics, assaults, robberies, and obviously we do have the drug situation. So I'm very proud of the fact, and I can't take credit for it because they were in place before. There's a variety of different programs within the jail. Currently, when I say currently, right now, the jail's capacity is 256 inmates. And of that, we have a female dorm, which can hold 54 females. Now, that's in a perfect scenario. There have been times, not this year, mostly because of COVID, that the daily numbers have been over 300. The jail, just in case you don't know, the jail mostly holds individuals that are awaiting trial and haven't been convicted. So I think our treatment plan is a little different. We're providing services, we're providing resources to people, so when they are removed from the jail setting, they can truthfully enhance their life. There are some occasions that maybe someone's convicted of a misdemeanor or a felony 4 or 5. They are convicted and they complete their sentence at the sheriff's office in that setting. But we still offer services. And one of the new programs, which we haven't totally unveiled yet, we've been talking to manufacturers. Right now, we all know there's a huge gap with the qualified employees or employees that want to work. And one of the programs we're going to try to start is maybe we take some inmates that want to have that opportunity. They go out for, maybe let's say 5 hours in that day. They learn a skill set. They're accompanied by a deputy. Obviously, these low-level offenders. We're going to be specific. But then when they come back and they're released, they now have a skill set so that they can go to that job. And they can, as the chief may mention, we can eliminate those associations that they had so they're not just recommitting and right back into the same scenario. So those are some of the programs we're hoping to start, but we have a variety. Actually, we're going to hopefully play a little video of a women's choir that I just sat through, and it was just very impactful to see these ladies. They were up there, they had energy, and they truthfully had hope, which I think says something about them and what they believe that they can achieve once they're out of there. We provide GED testing services, math and writing, tutoring, social studies, science classes, all in an effort to get them to be able to get their GED. And those are provided by Larry and Sue Jarvis. They're a contract worker for our agency, and they do a tremendous job. We already briefly spoke about alternative paths. They have, I believe it's 10 employees within our facility. They provide 6 clinical treatment sessions a week, and then a group therapy trauma class for females in there as well. So 7 times a week, they're meeting with inmates to provide them the necessary resources. And internally, we also provide classes for healthy relationships. And again, that also goes back, let's say it's a female's in there on a drug conviction, but maybe she's been a victim of domestic violence. We're trying to provide resources for those individuals as well, so they're not a victim repeatedly over and over again. We need to break that cycle. I know you have some programs you wanted to highlight on too, so I want.
Well, I just like to reiterate that the purpose of corrections, the purpose of the jail is to rehabilitate and to avoid any recidivism from the inmate, so that they don't reoffend. And I think you've seen with all these programs that we've talked about with violence, the jail has a tremendous amount of programs, because that really is the ultimate goal in corrections, is to rehabilitate so that they don't reoffend and come back into the jail. A lot of these programs also start at the courts. All of the courts here in Medina County have some type of drug court program, so that we're not locking up people who simply have an addiction to an illegal substance, that they're actually getting the treatment or a recovery program that they need that will assist them through the issues that they're having. In addition to that, municipal court also has a new Valor program, and it's a court docket that's specific for veterans and to assist them through the issues that they're having, readjusting to normal living here once they come back from a war zone, Iraq, Afghanistan, things like that. It's really a program geared to take care of our veterans. So those are really good core programs at the county level and the municipal level, right at the court stage, where they're trying to address some of these violence issues and mitigate some of them. I'm going to try and play just maybe 3 or 4 seconds of the ladies choir there at the county jail. If we can get that to work, it should pop up, and we'll play it for a few seconds here just as an example. Don't give up now. Sun will soon be shining. God's face of clouds. I'm still lining. Dreams and moves of mountains. Open up. So hopefully you guys were able to see that, but that's an example of that program at the jail. It's a great program. I think Tom Miller started that several years ago, and he is exceptionally proud of that program, and he should be. It's a great program.
I know we just showed a short snippet of it, but hopefully you could, and I know that video quality might have been lackluster on our part, but there's such a smile, and again, back to that hope. You know, when they get out, that they can make some changes. So I noticed there was one question. It's kind of on topic here, what we're talking about what about violence against children? How do we collaborate with Children's Services? All agencies in this county collaborate with Medina County Job and Family Services. That's a collaborative relationship where if they get a referral from maybe a mandatory reporter, such as a teacher, they fill out the documentation, send it over to whatever law enforcement agency is appropriate. That's investigated. Children's Center of Medina County is another vital resource in this county. It's unfortunate that we have to have it, but we're lucky that we do have that resource. They have a forensic interviewer that when there's a child that's makes allegations of sexual or physical abuse, that child is interviewed one time instead of being interviewed by a detective from law enforcement agency, maybe someone from Job and Family Services, maybe a prosecutor. Now we're not victimizing that child over and over and over again. It's one interview. Law enforcement, the prosecutor are in a separate room watching it on a camera, and are able to basically suggest questions. So that way, once that's done with, the child can start that healing process. And it's so, truthfully, it's disgusting that we have to have that, especially for our most innocent victims. Chief Kinney and I are both on the board of directors for the Children's Center, and the work that they do there is tremendous. And that's a partnership. We have a partnership. When I say we, the Children's Center and Job and Family Services has that partnership, so we're not duplicating services. So that hopefully that answers that question about how do we collaborate with Job and Family.
And that relationship we have with the Children's Center is critical for our detectives. They interact with the forensic interviewers there on a weekly basis. I can give you an example of a case that we had where a man was victimizing down on the south end of our town, victimizing one of the neighbor girls. It ended up being two neighbor girls. We were able to get Children's Services involved and the Children's Center. They were able to do a forensic interview of the victims. And because of the evidence that we were able to obtain through those interviews, we were able to get a life sentence conviction for rape on this individual that was victimizing these two girls. So it is definitely accomplished its goal by protecting children in this community, by getting that individual off the street and incarcerating him in jail where he belongs for the rest of his life. That's all the programs we have to mitigate violence and interrupt violence. As you can see, it's a robust list of programs that we have in this county. They're great resources that are available. But I think we'll go ahead and move on to some of the questions, Colleen, if you want to facilitate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So our first question is, what effect, if any, does social media have on incidents of violence?
I can jump on that one here very quickly. Locally, not so much, but we've seen the social media play a critical role in a lot of the violence that occurred over the summer last year, where they were using social media to organize riots, to obviously organize the assault on our Capitol that we saw in January. That was all organized through social media. So there is a nexus to social media with these large riotous events, not so much on a lower scale where it's individual violence against another individual, but these large scale riots and these demonstrations that we have, social media plays a vital role in that. And the benefit of that is that we're able to monitor the social media as well, because it's out in the public sphere that we can access as well. So locally, not so much of an issue, but nationally, it definitely is an issue for some of these larger cities that have experienced these serious and violent demonstrations over the past year and a half, 2 years.
Thanks, Ed. We have another question about how a person can get involved in helping with those affected by domestic violence to support the community and law enforcement. I would like to say we are having actually a program about domestic violence on October 12th, where we will have the Battered Women's Shelter coming and speaking about that. But is there a way that law enforcement needs assistance with that somebody in the community could help?
That's a good question. And I'm glad you made mention of the next class in October, because that's what I was going to say. The Battered Women's Shelter would be some resource that maybe someone could volunteer at or donate just resources to. The prosecutor's office, Prosecutor Thompson, does have a victim advocate that helps out with these, but I'm trying to think of any other volunteer opportunities for that type of thing. I can't off the top of my head, truthfully.
I think it's important to just be informed and know what's happening in your community as well. One of the programs we offer to accomplish that goal is the Citizens Police Academy. We offer that program typically once a year. Most recently, it's been held at Montville Police Department, where it's a collaborative event between really the central area of the county. They can come and they can learn about topics like that. They can be informed, that they're able to identify maybe if one of their friends or their family members are being exposed or victims of domestic violence, and they're able to intervene and maybe bring that situation to the attention of law enforcement. That's one way where you folks could help. But I think supporting some of the nonprofits that help out these victims of domestic violence, the Battered Women's Shelter, things like that. I think if you show support to those organizations, that would be very helpful.
Thank you. How about how many people are in jail because they can't pay bail?
I saw that question, and honestly, I don't have that number off the top of my head. I can report that back, maybe, Colleen, and we can get that out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to share it with the group. Once we upload this video, I'll be sharing the link for this video. And so I'll look for your email, Sheriff.
Sounds good.
Great. Got another question here. What's on your wish list that would help you in doing your job?
I can answer that quickly, and
It's probably the same answer that I have.
it's not so much a wish, because I think it's come to fruition, is community support. And we have a tremendous base of community support here. We could not do our jobs without that support. We work for the citizens of Medina and Medina County. And without that support, without that legitimacy that they grant us, we wouldn't be able to do our jobs. And I'm so fortunate to be able to work in this county. I'm not from here. I didn't grow up in Medina. And coming here, I realize how good we have it in this county and in this community. I have a different perspective, and I know how fortunate I am. Number one, to live in this county. Number two, to work for the Medina Police Department. And I'm so very fortunate to be able to lead the men and women of this police department. But definitely the community support.
I agree, and I agree with the chief's sentiment that we have that. I will say this, I would like at the sheriff's office to add resources, personnel. I think you probably read the article. Medina County has roughly 182,000 people. I think we're the 15th largest in the state of Ohio. And still there's a need for additional resources out there. When I see resources, deputies, and I don't want to speak for the chief, but I know there's other departments that are experiencing that. We're experiencing the same issue that other job industries are of finding individuals. So that is a tough challenge. And that's, again, let's be honest with ourselves. Last year's activity, what played out in the media has changed some people's mindset about law enforcement. Again, not so much here in Medina County, but when you watch the media, and I think we spoke about it actually earlier today, we, as in law enforcement officials, need to do a better job of presenting the positive work that all of our staff does. It's not the chief and I, it's the men and women that go out there day in, day out, holidays, nights, weekends, all the good work that they do. We need to promote that. So our community says, wow, I didn't know they did this. Wow, I didn't know that program existed. We're so used to it. And sometimes we take it for granted that we know about the programs, but we don't share that information with our community. And I think we can do a better job of that. And that in turn then helps, I guess, break down that mindset about this profession. I mean, I said it at the beginning, and I'm going back, I'm just repeating myself, but this is still one of the best occupations there is, where you can truly, every day, you have the ability to make a positive difference in someone's life. And we challenge our staff with that every day. And it's special. I mean, it really is when someone truly says, hey, thank you. You affected my life. You changed my life. You saved my life. That's powerful. And that's not something that should be taken for granted. That's for sure.
To follow up on that, I think that's another reason why I really enjoy venues like this, or opportunities like this, where we get to share information about our respective departments and just inform people of what we're doing and what we're doing on your behalf for the community. I think it's vitally important that the citizens understand what we're doing and what we do and why we do it.
We've got a couple more questions that just came in. With the population growth in Medina, do you see an increase in domestic violence or drug violence?
Yeah,
good.
Yeah. I think that's just the nature of statistics. As the population increases, the calls for service increase, the need for extra officers increase. Of course, domestic violence across the board, every statistic increases as the population grows, and we are struggling to keep up with that.
I absolutely agree. I agree. Yeah, based on the increase, we're going to see a rise in numbers.
Besides Serenite, what other programs do you know about that we can donate to that help people learn a trade?
Is that for those that are already probably in the law enforcement setting? It's a great question. I know there's other resources, but they're for people that aren't in the law enforcement setting already. I know CATS does different programming in Wadsworth, and the Hope Community is another outpatient treatment, but that's not correlated right to law enforcement. Hopefully we get our program in the jail up and running, and not that you can donate to, but that would be some different program to help with the trades.
I think Hope Recovery, and they just opened a new house here on Wadsworth Road. So they now have 2 facilities. Hope Recovery is a great program run by Stephanie Robinson. That's definitely a program that's worthy of support, and they do help out recovering addicts.
What's weighing heavy on your team members? What kind of support do they need?
Well, I can say this, and again, it's like a broken record, but sometimes they just need the time off, right? And when you're short-staffed, your officers or deputies are constantly working. And one of the things we're taking seriously is their welfare. That's been a big push throughout the state of Ohio. But that is certainly something, again, when you have the ability to have people properly staffed, you're not overtaxing them. And that's certainly, and I go back to the dispatch component, that job is a very, very taxing job. And I want to give credit to them and our COs. Sometimes I think maybe in law enforcement, we forget about that component, but they do a very, very hard job.
For our officers, we had a rough go of it back there in the summer of 2020 during those demonstrations. We were disappointed that a lot of people wanted to project some of the poor policing examples that we saw. There's no doubt. And all of us were embarrassed by what we saw in Minneapolis with George Floyd. It was disgusting to see a police officer betray his oath and the badge that he wore to behave in the manner that he behaved. But the fact that they then tried to project that behavior here in Medina was difficult for our officers to accept. I don't imagine, and I don't believe that that's the majority view that people have of the Medina Police Department here in Medina. But there were quite a few vocal people who tried to project those issues here into our community. One of the positive things that came from that was that we did have those demonstrations over that weekend. There was 5 of them, and they were all very peaceful and very productive. And from those demonstrations, we partnered with many different individuals, many different leaders in the community, so that we can share what our police department does and what we do to maintain our legitimacy and what our policies are and what our officers, their guiding principles, their core values, and how they do their job. And it's my job as the chief to make sure everybody's informed of that. And again, it comes back to taking every opportunity to get in front of an audience to discuss these issues. But that was weighing heavily on them. Again, we're very fortunate that we live in Medina and we do have overwhelming community support. So that's been very helpful. And of course, this whole time period since COVID started has been quite challenging for us.
And I just want to say, on a regular basis, I'm sure it's the same for the city too. It's nice to hear those positive messages. Hey, I just want to let you know your deputy was very professional, did this, and then we share that. And I think that goes back to what the chief was saying. It boosts that morale. It lets them know, okay, hey, people will appreciate what we're doing out here. So I would just share that. If you ever have that opportunity, it does go a long way for sure.
Thank you. If a person suspects another person is the victim of domestic violence, what are the steps in reporting it?
You want me to?
Sure.
Whatever local jurisdiction, they can make a third-party phone call to that agency and it would be investigated. Or they can bring the victim to that agency to make an in-person report. There's nothing wrong with trying to help someone end that cycle of violence and to get involved. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, but sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes you need to guide someone to make that tough decision to maybe leave or take their children somewhere else and to take them to that agency. It doesn't have to be when it's ongoing. It could be a late report and that case is still taken very seriously. So if you see that, I would just really implore you to get involved and help your friend or family member in that.
Yeah, I think it's important, if appropriate, you feel comfortable to actually have a conversation with that individual to see if you can maybe guide them or engage them to find out exactly what's going on. And if they're willing to, yes, bring them to the proper jurisdiction. And there's also some counseling avenues that you could direct them to as well. If they're not interested in the law enforcement or the legal remedies to it, I would then encourage them to enter into some type of counseling so that somebody can walk them through the situation they're in, try and again end that cycle of violence. That's really the ultimate goal.
Thank you so much. Chief Kinney, I was thinking, and a little bit earlier when you were talking about everything that happened last year and how discouraging that was for your team, I was thinking about some of the actions you took to show solidarity with, people in our community, like walking down the sidewalk hand in hand with Pastor Ruffin. And then following that, some of the programs that you've been doing, which are really difficult conversations to be having. And you've been doing that on Medina Cable Access with Pastor Ruffin and Mayor Hanwell. Did you want to talk about how that even got started and who came up with that idea and what kind of community response have you had from doing those?
Sure. All the credit goes to Pastor Ruffin, Pastor Arthur Ruffin. He approached us before all those protests. We sat down and we had those difficult conversations, and he didn't hold back. He asked those hard questions of both the mayor and myself, and we answered his questions honestly. And he had questions like, do you have to provide a driver's license on a traffic stop? What are the policies on use of force? Can you point a gun at somebody? Why are these officers shooting people and they're not immediately arrested? He had those questions, which are legitimate questions. And if you're not in the law enforcement field, you really wouldn't understand or know the answers to that. And that is representative throughout the entire minority community. And what that told me was that we're not doing a good job explaining to, number one, the minority community, and number two, the community at large, what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it. A lot of things have happened since then. I committed to him that this was not going to be a little walk around the square and they're going to take pictures of us and that's going to be it. We have maintained this relationship up until this day. I attend monthly pastors meetings now with Pastor Ruffin. He facilitates those meetings. I've been on the cable television channel several times where we've rehashed these conversations that Pastor Ruffin, the mayor, and I have had publicly so that the people can hear the answers to those questions. Some of the other things that we've done is post our policy. Our entire policy manual is on our webpage. I think we're probably the only one in this region that does that. And that's all an effort for transparency. If you have a question about a policy that we have or why we did something, you can go onto our website and look that policy up. In addition to that, we also have our year-end report. And I would encourage you to take a look at our year-end report. Some of the things that we've added to that is a whole chapter on accountability. So we report all our uses of force, the circumstances of the uses of force, and the biographical data, the race of the individuals, race and sex of the individuals that force is applied to. We also publish our discipline, any discipline we've had for the year and the reason for the discipline. We've also published our traffic stop race bias data, and it shows the number of people that we stop overall, their whether they're white, black, Hispanic, Asian. So a lot of positive movement has come out of those protests and that relationship that we have with Pastor Ruffin. Too many to list. It really has been a beneficial relationship that we have with Pastor Ruffin, and I again have committed to working with him well into the future.
If I could just add, there's a task force came together through, probably started back in 2012, the Ohio Collaborative, to have the best, I guess, what's the right word, best policies on certain topics. And again, it's not both of the chief and myself, almost, I'm not 100% sure, but almost every agency in Medina County law enforcement agency in Medina County has complied with those requirements. So that's something, again, we should all be proud of, that we're leading that, not coming up to it after the fact. Most of these policies were already in place. So.
And we are we are an example of departments in the state. Shortly after those the protests that we had and the relationship and the programs that we started with Pastor Ruffin, the governor's office contacted us. And what brought us to their attention was the document that I released, Fairness and Equity in Policing. And if you have a minute, jump onto our website. It's www.medinaoh.org. Navigate to the police department. And there's a document there, again, titled Fairness and Equity in Policing. And that was a document I released after having conversations with Pastor Ruffin and with some other individuals from the minority community. And it answers so many of their questions that they had at the time. It's a 6 or 8 page document. And again, it is our response to a lot of the questions that were very relevant at that time. Somehow it came across the governor's desk and they called us to ask questions about the relationship we had, about the programs we started, and about the information in the document. And they were very interested in that and looked at us as an example for other departments throughout the state.
Thank you. I put your website up there, and I also just linked that policy fairness link there. So,
Great.
and I'll also try to send it out to anybody who's on the telephone today and can't see these links. So we'll send it when we follow up with everybody. As we're kind of closing up here, because we've got 2 more minutes, I think this is a great opportunity to talk about anything else, specifically, like if someone wanted to donate to McPowell, Sheriff, what kind of needs do you have at McPowell? And how can we help?
McPowell is a 501c3, so if anyone wants to just make a monetary donation, you can do that to MCPAL, and it's at the sheriff's office. So it's just 555 Independence Drive. It's a Medina zip code. And then thankfully, as I said before, Feeding Medina County, the Akron Canton Food Bank, they help us out greatly with that food. Not only do we do food for the families, but we also do it at the programs itself. So that's another way people can help out.
And our FOP also sponsors our Shop with a Cop program. That's always a good charity that I like to steer people in the direction to for funding as well. That's a great program that we take the children every Christmas time. We take them up to Walmart or Target, and we actually go shop, and they're able to pick out a few presents for them, their family, and it's a great program. And again, it comes down to building relationships with the children in our community.
And if someone wanted to donate to that, who should they contact?
They could contact Mark Brooks or Darren Stout of the Medina County FOP. And Darren Stout is our Medina County Drug Task Force Director, and Mark Brooks is a school resource officer down in Cloverleaf, right?
Correct.
Yeah, he works for the Sheriff's Department. So they're both officers in the FOP and can direct you to give you instructions on how to donate for that program. But it is a great program as well as McPowell.
Well, fantastic. I just want to thank you again for joining us today. We've had a lot of accolades in the chat about the work that you and your team are doing. People are proud of our police forces in Medina County. So thank you for joining us today. And for everyone else, thank you for joining us too. We hope that you'll come to our next program, which is on Tuesday, September 21st at noon. We're going to be talking about positive reinforcement techniques to encourage nonviolence. We have Dr. Linda Randall, who's going to tell us about the science behind that. And as well, we'll have Ron Stoller, who's the superintendent of the Medina County Juvenile Detention Center, who's going to be talking about how they've used these positive reinforcement techniques to reduce violence by 65% at their facility. So I hope you'll join us for that. Go to our website to register. This is a free event that we'll be recording. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.